Senhoras e senhores, muito bom dia. Nós lembramos mais uma vez aqueles que necessitarem de fones de tradução para a palestra que será ministrada em inglês depois da abertura deste nosso segundo dia de trabalhos, deverão retirar o fone aqui na área de recepção. Nós temos alguns números mais de 600 pessoas acompanhando a abertura do GovTech Summit. Mais de 1.000 pessoas circularam pelo evento durante o dia de ontem, um número muito interessante. Mais de 60 municípios o que dá 15 horas de conteúdo nos 2 dias de evento. E o GovTech Summit tem 193 mil resultados até agora na busca do Google. Uma salva de palmas ao nosso grande evento. Nós lembramos a todos que a partir das 10h30, no piso inferior, no palco Sebrae X, nós teremos a palestra da secretária Selma Fraga sobre Gravataí 2031, uma cidade inovadora. Eu gostaria de chamar agora o meu colega Marcelo
esse evento pioneiro que chega para fortalecer relacionamentos, reunir empresas e governos interessados em inovação tecnológica voltada ao setor público. O principal objetivo do GovTech Summit é conectar empreendedores digitais, startups e decisores do setor público na busca por soluções tecnológicas inovadoras para melhorar serviços e processos, gerando impacto positivo na população. Também é fundamental agradecer aos patrocinadores do evento: Governo do Estado do Rio Grande do Sul, Banrisul, Badesul e BRDE. Também agradecemos o apoio do Summit, Sebrae e Sebrae X, SESI RS, Senai RS, Instituto Evaldo Lodge, IEL, e Centro de Desenvolvimento da Gestão Pública e Políticas Educacionais da Fundação Getúlio Vargas. Agradecemos também ao apoio da Prefeitura de Porto Alegre, FAMURS, Brasil Lab, Pacto Alegre, Anamid, Energy, Grupo Imob, Eletromídia, Band e Rede Pampa. Um agradecimento especial aos expositores presentes também na nossa Feira GovTech, a Oracle, Brasil Lab, Dataprom, a KVO ESG, Digitus, Metagov, HT4 Tecnologia, Giza Gestão da Saúde, eLight ERP 360, Educatec e 8 startups do Sebrae X, a Carimbado, a BGAPP, Olá Doutor, iSend, Educamente, NextN, Sente Monitor e Consignado App.
Bom dia, estamos começando agora as transmissões aqui pela Cuboplay do segundo dia do GovTech Summit, esse grande evento que busca fortalecer e estimular o ecossistema de inovação com foco no setor público. Será mais um dia, a exemplo de ontem, com muitas manifestações, muitas apresentações de cases de sucessos, com muitas conquistas na área da inovação, muitas soluções de inovação, focadas naturalmente no setor público, que é o grande objetivo deste evento. Logo depois da abertura oficial desse segundo dia, nós começaremos já com uma palestra internacional. Estará aqui no palco principal a PAOLA Santana. Ela é CEO da Glass Government Ecosystem, empresa de São Francisco, na Califórnia, nos Estados Unidos, baseada no Vale do Silício, né, o famoso Vale do Silício, a meca da tecnologia da informação, um dos polos mundiais pioneiros na concentração de grandes empresas nesta área. Você segue acompanhando então tudo aqui no palco principal, sempre pela Cuboplay.
Ontem vimos aqui muitas palestras e debates de altíssima qualidade sobre o ecossistema GovTech. E hoje não vai ser diferente. A programação está incrível e na primeira palestra do dia de hoje, nós vamos receber a PAOLA Santana, que é CEO e fundadora da Glass, startup norte-americana que vem revolucionando a forma como governos compram. Reforçando então que a PAOLA ela fará a apresentação em inglês, então, por favor, caso necessário, retirem o dispositivo para tradução. Que tenham um ótimo segundo dia de GovTech Summit e, de novo, muito obrigado pela presença de todos vocês.
Obrigado ao Gabriel Fuscaldo. A gente segue por aqui, com cerimonial. Permanece aqui no palco, Gabriel. Faremos, nesse momento, a entrega do certificado de compensação carbono zero a GovTech Summit RS. A KVO ESG, por meio do Programa de Redução e Compensação de Emissões, declara que o GovTech Summit realizou a compensação de CC68T CO2, equivalente por meio da aquisição de créditos de carbono referente a emissões de gases de efeito estufa, em um evento realizado em 2023. Convidamos a coordenadora de sustentabilidade da KVO ESG, Francine Senzi de Ré, para a entrega do certificado ao head do GovTech Summit, CEO da Move, Gabriel Fuscaldo.
Bom dia a todos. Em nome do Gabriel Fuscaldo, agradeço a organização do evento por confiar no trabalho da Acvo ESG e aproveito para parabenizá-los pela iniciativa de trazer para o evento uma das práticas ESG, tornando o GovTech Summit um evento carbono neutro. A adesão ao Programa de Redução e Compensação de Emissões, homologado pela concessão do selo PRCE, demonstra o compromisso do evento com uma das questões mais urgentes do nosso tempo, as mudanças climáticas. Quando pensamos em um evento carbono neutro, para fazer o inventário de gases de efeito estufa, nós consideramos 3 pilares. A questão do deslocamento do público, público flutuante, palestrantes e demais convidados, a questão da geração de resíduos e o consumo de energia elétrica. Então, as nossas equipes passaram nos estandes coletando essas informações de deslocamento para, então, fazer o inventário de emissões do evento. Gostaria de convidá-los para acompanhar esse inventário, a quantificação desses dados. Podem passar no nosso estande, serão todos bem-vindos. Muito obrigada, novamente, pela oportunidade.
Obrigado a Gabriel Fuscaldo, a Francine de Ré. Parabéns ao GovTech Summit pela iniciativa deste evento sustentável. Nós passamos a palavra agora a David Viegas, que é gestor de projetos e inovação do Sebrae RS.
Bom dia a todos, tudo bem? Primeiro, parabenizar todos vocês por estarem aqui, né? Com certeza foi um desafio hoje pela manhã, o clima não ajudou muito, mas com certeza vai ser de muito bom uso esse tempo de vocês hoje, se conectando principalmente com todas as tecnologias, startups e conteúdos que o evento disponibiliza. Gostaria de parabenizar em nome do Sebrae RS o Fuscaldo e a Move Eventos, a agência, e a História Eventos também, em nome da Beatriz. O evento com certeza está entregando muita qualidade de uma pauta super relevante para nós do Sebrae, com certeza, dentro das iniciativas que a gente já tem com os pequenos negócios, com as prefeituras e com as startups, isso conglomera todas essas ações e, com certeza, faz muito sentido para o nosso mercado. Então, parabéns pelo evento e que sigam os conteúdos aí de ótima qualidade para nós todos. Bom dia para todos.
Obrigado ao David Viegas. Também destacamos a presença da equipe do Banrisul, patrocinador deste evento, que ontem foi representado pelo diretor de Inovação e Tecnologia, Jorge Krug, e pela superintendente de Marketing, Vanice Ramos. E hoje temos o superintendente executivo, Unidade Desenvolvimento, Ivanir Damiani. Convido o Ivanir para uma explanação aqui do Banrisul.
Bom dia a todos. É um prazer imenso estar aqui, participando desse evento tão importante. Primeiro, GovTech Summit. E a gente já sabe que está sendo um sucesso. E o Banrisul tem uma satisfação imensa de apoiar esse projeto como patrocinador master. O Banrisul vem apoiando, de certa forma, de forma bastante ativa, projetos de inovação, apoio à inovação. Nós temos o projeto Banritec, que ele é uma aceleradora de startups. Hoje nós já aceleramos mais de 60 startups. Estamos na fase de aceleração de mais 30 startups. Nós participamos do Instituto Caldeira como patrocinador master, também temos apoiado muito esse projeto. Participamos com o projeto NAVE, juntamente com a Tecnopuc, em desenvolvimento de inteligência artificial. Além de tudo, a gente lançou no mercado aí, a Gaúcho, o edital de inovação, em março do ano passado. Já estamos na terceira fase, já recebemos mais de 100 projetos. Desses mais de 100 projetos, a gente já financiou mais de 50. Estamos em análise de outros projetos. Esse projeto, essa fase do edital de inovação, ela vai até o final do mês. Assim que terminar, logo nós lançaremos a quarta fase do edital de inovação, permitindo que as empresas inovadoras consigam colocar os projetos dentro do edital e a gente, dentro da possibilidade, apoiar esses projetos. Além de tudo, a gente disponibiliza de linhas de crédito, principalmente com recursos da FINEP, para repasse, com taxas atrativas, e a gente tem vários projetos em andamento, então a gente procura participar de forma ativa no apoio desses projetos de inovação. Então, parabéns a todos pela iniciativa. Um ótimo trabalho a todos e é uma satisfação muito grande o banco estar participando desse projeto. Muito obrigado, um ótimo dia.
Antes de nós chamarmos a primeira palestra do dia, o primeiro painel, vamos acompanhar vídeos dos patrocinadores do GovTech Summit Rio Grande do Sul. Aí, portanto, começamos então o nosso primeiro palco Banrisul GovTech com a palestra Glass, Government Infrastructure for the Future, com a nossa convidada do Vale do Silício, PAOLA Santana. Seja bem-vinda. Welcome, PAOLA Santana. PAOLA Santana é fundadora e CEO da Social Glass Government Ecosystems, advogada especialista em compras públicas e cofundadora da Maternet, empresa do Vale do Silício, pioneira em redes de logística e drones. Experiência mais recente inclui a coelaboração da parceria público-privada do primeiro sistema Hyperloop de vários estados nos Estados Unidos, professora da Singularity University e mentora da Social Entrepreneurship Labs da Stanford University e também do Google Inteligência Artificial. Please, again.
Eu vou sentar para... Não? Okay. Hello, everyone. Actually, bom dia, Porto Alegre. Eu estou muito contenta de estar aqui. Eu falo um pouquinho português, portunhol, mas Brasil é um lugar maravilhoso. Brasil foi o primeiro país onde nós falamos de glass, 5 anos, no 2017. So, thank you so much for having me again. It's always exciting to come to the places where we've have dreams, where we have talked to people, met people that are really pushing forward a lot of and creating the future. I hope that our translators can capture my excitement of being here, because that's what I get when I come to Brazil, excitement about the future. And I hope that we can have a great conversation. If there's anything that I talk that you don't understand, make faces like, what is she talking about? I will make sure to go back and to make sure to explain so you can understand. The goal is that after my talk, you can really understand that we're empowered to create the change that we want to see in the world. And thank you to Agencia Move. Thank you, Gabriel, for having me, for being an excellent partner for everything we're doing in the United States and hopefully in Latin America. So, my name is PAOLA Santana, and I'm the founder and CEO of Glass, and I'm also the co-founder of Maternet, the first drone delivery company in the world. And today I'm going to be talking about creating infrastructure for the future. Not just government infrastructure, not just public infrastructure, but the infrastructure that moves the world. So who has heard the word moonshot? That's how I want to start. In the back? Nobody? Moonshots? Anybody can say what is a moonshot? Come on, Brazilians are not shy, so what is a moonshot? A disparo to the moon. Okay. Anybody else? What is a moonshot? Something out of the box? Anybody else? So I've been talking about moonshots for 15 years now. And this is a slide that I almost never talk about because in my brain, we already know what is a moonshot, but we don't. And this is what is important. So I'm gonna start with a quote by a very famous person. I'll tell you who he is later, that defines what is a moonshot. And I quote, "But why, some say, the moon? Why choose this as our goal? And they may well ask, why climb the highest mountain? Why, 35 years ago, fly the Atlantic? We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they're easy, but because they're hard. Because that goal will serve to organize and measure the best of our energies and skills, Because that challenge is one that we are willing to accept, one we are unwilling to postpone, and one which we intend to win. That was the speech from John F. Kennedy in 1962 that launched the first human mission to the moon. That speech launched the aerospace industry. Today, you and I know John F. Kennedy and the United States, they were successful because 7 years later, in 1969, he said in this decade, in 1969, the Apollo mission, the Apollo 11 mission, put the first human on the surface of the moon. Not the Apollo 1, not the Apollo 2, not the Apollo 3. It took 7 missions to do that earlier, and then the last 4 to really make it. And it took 7 years. So when he said this in 1962 in front of Rice University, in a great stage like this one, today we know he was a visionary, but back then he was very stupid. That's how people thought he was. When he made this same speech in front of Congress, people were thinking, what are you talking about? We just launched NASA in 1958. NASA had only been in business for 4 years. So he didn't know what he was talking about. And this is part of the DNA of a moonshot. Moonshots are innovative and hard ideas. If you know how to explain them, it's not a moonshot. Because in principle, you don't understand precisely, there are no words to describe what you're doing. They have very unclear implementation techniques. They have unknown chances of success. You don't know if you're going to make it. Very likely, you won't make it. But many people ask me, Paola, I mean, moonshots are very hard. So why are we doing moonshots? They're hard. We don't know how to explain them. We look dumb in front of people. Why would we do a moonshot? And actually, we don't even know how much money it's going to take. Maybe we're going to just burn money for 10 years by the time a moonshot happens. The one thing that a moonshot gives you is that because it's an idea that is bigger than you and bigger than society, it gives you the gift of growing bigger than what you thought you were going to grow. So moonshots are a present. By the time you finish implementing a moonshot, you have worked in industries that didn't exist. You have created things that didn't exist. You have coined new terms on Wikipedia. You have made a lot of money too on the way because you're creating massive positive value for you and the world. So the gift of moonshots is that you start operating outside of your bucket list. Do you guys know what a bucket list is? This list that you say, I want to go to Paris, I want to go to Rio, I want to go to Porto Alegre, I want to talk at a GovTech summit. You start checking all those boxes, and then you're like, wow, I'm transforming countries. I'm improving my community. I have a piece of software that is impacting 1 billion people in the world. It's like, who thought that? Not me, the moonshot mindset. And this is how I want to start this conversation today, because if after this talk you don't leave from here with a sense of urgency that you can create a moonshot, I didn't do my job. So it's very important that you understand the moonshot mindset starting from the beginning. I know this because I've done 2 moonshots by now. We call them experiments in Silicon Valley. All these things you hear about startups, we're like, I don't know if this is gonna work. We talk this way, we say like, maybe it doesn't work, but I'm doing an experiment. And by experimenting, I give myself opportunity to play. And play is very important. And this is part of the things that we think public sector doesn't have. By the time you talk that something is working or that it's not working, you need to give yourself space to say it's not working. Because you don't do what you think you're already doing. You don't learn what you think you already know. So if we say that we're running our countries perfectly, then there's no opportunity for growth. And this is why we need to do a lot more experiments. I've been experimenting in Silicon Valley for the last 15 years. My first experiment is Matternet. Matternet is a short name for an Internet of Matter. When we started this network of drones moving things building the drones, the AI, the piece of technology that moves the drones from one place to another, and the ground stations that put, with a robotic arm, the packages on the drones so the drones can move, we didn't know what we really were creating. We just wanted to have a vision of a system like the internet that could move not bits of information, but bits of atoms on the background 24/7, just like the internet is doing today. Let me show you how that looks, and then we can deep dive. So this was my first experiment at building public infrastructure. I didn't know I was building public infrastructure. I knew I wanted to solve a problem. That's how I landed in Silicon Valley. I'm a lawyer, for those of you that are lawyers too. And I got into Silicon Valley before that with a Fulbright scholarship to study the future of governments. And I landed on drones because I really wanted to build infrastructure so I could connect 1 billion people that are disconnected on their first and last mile, because who was supposed to build those roads? Government. Why haven't they built it for decades? No question, no answer. I don't know. But I knew that there was something that we could do with the technology that we had in hand. We were looking at three key pieces of technology, and I want to explain this to you because, again, we didn't build the first drones, my company. We didn't build the first line of code for artificial intelligence, and we didn't build the robotic arms that are putting the packages on the drones and removing the packages of the drones. But we did build the first drone delivery network in the world, the first drone regulation in the world, and the first permanent operation of drones flying over people and over property, carrying a package that could be a medicine, that could be an organ, and that could be a pint of blood to save someone's lives. So when we started, we were looking at a very simple problem, people that is disconnected on the first and last mile. 1 billion people live in these conditions today. We have these conditions here in Brazil. I come from places that have this all around the Dominican Republic. That's where I'm from. And it was interesting because I'm 37, and since I was born until now, these people are still disconnected. So this is totally disconnected from political parties and candidates and colors. It's like a problem that nobody has decided to definitively solve for everyone. And this is, for me, the key of what public sector should strive to do. When we started pitching this in Silicon Valley, this was not sexy. And this is why my message here is to remind everyone that comes from the emerging world that the people that understand the problems that we need to fix in the world are the people that come from the places where these problems exist. In Silicon Valley, they were not paying attention until I reminded them, hey, yes, this problem is lack of road in one place, but in New York City, I don't care if you're Bill Gates, at 5 p.m. you're going to be locked in traffic, so you're not going to get anything moving. So the same problem that you have on one end without roads is the same problem you have at the other end with plenty of roads that are fixed, expensive to build and expensive to maintain infrastructure. 4 billion people live in cities and mega cities that are also congested and we cannot move things around. So we started with an MVP. Why an MVP is important? A minimum viable product. Because you don't finish where you start. So how can we have a beautiful drone infrastructure system starting with investing $1 billion that I didn't have in a place that didn't even have drone regulation? We had to start with improvements of 10%. That is what we call in Silicon Valley a minimum viable product. And this looks like this, and not like the beautiful drone you saw in the video. I love this picture because it's the first time that we could go to a place to solve a real problem with the drones. And next to the second largest, tallest Buddha in the world, this drone looked a lot like a very crappy, ugly thing that I was embarrassed to put in the world. But this was the first prototype of something that could deliver the vision of what we wanted to do in the world that didn't exist before. Eventually, other countries said, like, you know what, we need that too. And then we went to Malawi, as you can see the difference between this drone, doesn't have the propellers covered. The package was loose in the air. The antenna was loose, bad GPS, bad reception. Then we went into this drone that has the package covered. It was using a little bit of AI, so the drone knew where it was and where it was going, and it created a route that 80% of the time was flying over covered property and not over people. So we were adding layers of 10%, 10%, 10% improvement until some more sophisticated countries invited us to also test our system in their geographies. So by the time we got to operate on the moonshot level, that is the 10x, we had done so many iterations, we had failed so much, but eventually, 5 years later, Swiss Airlines called us and was like, you know what, I need to move healthcare items between my hospitals, can you come? And we started adding the third layer of technology that is the first prototype of the ground station. The first ground station, this thing that you see on the ground, it didn't have a robotic arm that does everything on its own and that knows that a drone is coming. It was simply a place to tell the drone, this is where you can land safely and this is where you can take off safely. That was the last layer of technology that we added. Eventually, we started to integrate with the whole transportation chain. That's the first use of a drone dispatching and landing over a moving vehicle that is a van from Mercedes-Benz. So we could do the first and last mile with the drone, and then the common mile with a vehicle that could hold more packages than just one single package. That is what our drones can carry. Eventually, I managed to take the drones to the Dominican Republic. Isn't that contradictory? 7 years later, I took the drones to the place where I learned where the problem was. That's crazy, right? But you know why? Because in LATAM, we don't believe in our people. We need someone from the outside to come here to tell us how to solve our problems. Because if I'm Dominican and I want to improve the healthcare system in my country, I need to go out to the United States so I can come with the technology from outside. That's why it took 7 years to work with the Inter-American Development Bank and take a piece of technology that was born out of seeing this problem in my home country, where my family comes from, that is one of the poorest regions in the Dominican Republic. It got done just 7 years later. Eventually, we could take the drones to the United States, working with UPS and a couple of other delivery companies, passed the first drone regulation in the United States, and were able to have our full drone delivery system, the first of its kind in the world. This is how it looks today. You can see I'm proud to watch that video. Like, it took 12 years to build that vision, layer by layer. And we're not gonna go into not raising money for this type of infrastructure company, and we're not gonna talk about immigration, and we're not gonna talk about what it takes to get into Silicon Valley, because the end of the story is that it's possible. So many people have always asked me, how do you go from drones to what you're doing now at Glass? That is a different type of infrastructure. It's digital infrastructure for governments. But it's the same thing. Drones are physical infrastructure to move something from point A to point B at a fraction of the cost, in a fraction of the time, in places where that was not possible before, for people that didn't have access to send their small products to the local nearest market, or for people that couldn't access healthcare services, even though they were 1 kilometer away from that small clinic. And with Glass, 7 years later, after founding Matternet, I reminded myself, what am I doing in Silicon Valley? I came here to learn how to build technology so I could leapfrog poor governance. Why? Why do I care about that? Because governments are the biggest decision makers in the world. It also happens that them being the biggest decision makers in the world, determining the way we live and the opportunities that we have to thrive from, do we get an ID to, can we get to Porto Alegre to a conference and all the public infrastructure that we use, it also happens that governments are the single largest buyers in the world. So we're not talking about an entity here where we delegate all of our power and we tell them, please try to fix everything that we need on our day-to-day lives and figure out how to do it. No, 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 no. We delegated all of the power, and we delegated all of the money, and we delegated all of the time. So you, public sector here listening to me, go and figure out these challenges. You're not alone. You have the money. We gave it to you. So the question is, what are you waiting? What's missing? I operate in the United States because the United States government is the single largest buyer in the world. So I'm where the problem is, where the big, big, big problem is. And I want to show you this quickly because when I show this video to our advisors, people that is very knowledgeable in procurement systems, how to buy things in the government, when I show them this, they tell me, Paola, but I was using that system 15 years ago when I was in government. I'm like, yeah, still using it today. So if I'm surprising my advisors, imagine everybody that doesn't know anything about public procurement. I'm surprising you too. So let me show you how the United States government buys stuff. Federal government, page didn't load. City of Seattle, one of the top 20 economies in the United States, every time they want to purchase something, they have to download the contract. This is a state-of-the-art Oracle. Okay, great software. They can see the email, they can see the phone number, they can see the website of the vendor, and now they need to send an email to that vendor so they can purchase something in real time. Every day, they post things that they want to buy. You can see all these solicitations on a Google Drive, but you cannot respond on a Google Drive. Every day, the court systems are publishing what they want to buy. You cannot respond on a smart sheet to what they want to buy. Every day, millions of dollars get issued on government checks. Even digital purchases, they have taxes calculated manually. Every day, misuse and abuse of government credit cards. If you go to the smallbusinessadministration.gov, that is where every small business in the United States is registered, try to find a small business here. Impossible. If you go to the Social Security vendor program, it's a PDF. That's the program, a PDF. And if you go to the Stanford Linear Accelerator, that is one of the biggest particle accelerators in the world, where you discover core science, and you want to register so you can sell to one of the largest purchasers in the world. This is on purpose. Page never loaded. So this wouldn't be a problem if governments weren't the largest purchasers in the world. Governments spend $16 trillion every year in the world to make our world run, operate. And the problem is that we are spending this $16 trillion through paper-based, manual, obsolete, lengthy procurement and manual processes day to day. One of the biggest, when you go deep into a problem, one of the things that we discovered, we're all focused on contracts and corruption and talking contracts, corruption. I'm like, I'm done with that conversation. Let me see what else is there. And we discovered small purchases. There are purchases in government that happen every day, especially in the United States government. They are under $25,000, and a small purchase of under $25,000 takes the same amount of time, training, people, and paperwork than a multi-million-dollar purchase. I'm like, you gotta be kidding me, right? This is very American, like, come on, you're joking. So we started going into many other countries, especially in LATAM, and we started asking them, how many small purchases are you making that do not require bidding? They were like, World Bank was like, we don't have that number. We don't do that metric. I'm like, okay. In any other part of the world, when you ask a question and they tell you we don't do that, or we don't have the metric, you would say, this is not a problem. But because I'm applying moonshot mindset and counterintuitive thinking, I'm thinking, if the World Bank says they don't have this data, this is the problem. You cannot fix what you cannot see. That's where glass comes. I want to see. I want to see with a different glass so I can do something about it. And that's how we discovered that between 30 to 50% of government transactions in general are small, discretionary purchases done with a credit card or through a direct email sending a purchase order. The moment of breakthrough came when we said, what happens if we canalize these small purchases to small businesses? Small to small. Nothing crazy, right? We go again into basics, right? Oh, by the way, small businesses are the foundation of our country's economies. 400 million small businesses create 99% of everything that happens in our economy. But you know what? Small businesses do not sell to government. Less than 1% of small businesses sell to government. So what I'm telling you is that 40% of our country's budgets do not talk to the foundation of our country's economies. That's what I'm telling you. So, in the words of Bloomberg, after 7 years of research, a small procurement is a $3.7 trillion no-brainer market that the World Bank said that they didn't have data on. And that's what we're operating on. Our flagship product, our first experiment, our MVP, is a pioneering government marketplace for small purchases, what we call micro purchases in the United States, without bids or paperwork, so government buyers with a government credit card can find goods, services, rental software in one single place and buy from pre-verified vendors that are not government-registered vendors. That's the disruption. How does that work? Very simple. We provide one very powerful search bar with a single screen product and price comparison. Governments can sort. Many people think that government is always trying to find the cheapest thing. Not true. They're trying to find the most reliable vendor with the highest quality item that they need to purchase to get their job done. So with this sorting, they can optimize for price, local delivery, past performance, or socioeconomic goal. I need to buy from women-owned. I need 1% preference for veteran-owned, black-owned businesses, minorities, cooperatives, etc. They can, in that same flow, verify that that vendor is not a registered vendor, but is perfectly suited to fulfill that government order. We can confirm that the vendor is not blacklisted, that the vendor is on day with their taxes, that they have an active business license, and we can check other database to check that this business have never been debarred or tasked with corruption. And the buyer can check out. They can pay with a government check, government credit card. They can even pay later or just pay with a purchase order. However you want to pay, just check out. That's not even the job. You haven't started doing the job. Just get the thing, get it done, move, and track what you're doing. You can access these intelligent dashboards where we can track budgets, track corruption, trace the whole thing beginning to end, set spending limits, and audit documents and generate reports. Think about this for a second. You're making purchases the whole day. all day, all the time. In 1 year from now, an auditor is going to come and tell you, why did you choose Paola and not Gabriel? You're like, made 5,000 purchases this year. I can't recall. Well, here you don't have to recall because we're recording everything you're doing. So what we are creating, in a nutshell, is a first-of-its-kind frictionless platform. Click, 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 click. You cannot get out of that flow because we already implemented the rule of business in the back end of the software. It's a single-screen process. You can create a universal cart. It's not just for buying goods for government. You can buy microservices, rentals, software, and whatnot. We are showing local first, small first businesses, and because we are verifying these vendors in advance, governments can get things that are same hour or even same day at a fraction of the cost that they would get it if they did a whole procurement process. This is a huge market that we discovered. We think it's a $3.7 trillion market. We are only starting by selling this software to local city governments in the United States that represent $100 billion market. And it took us a couple of years to raise our seed round. We have raised $3 million in funding recently, a month ago. And it's funny because while we were telling this vision to the world, again, I was thinking, well, this is my second time doing a startup, so I know how to do it. I come from the government sector. I'm a Fulbright scholar. I have the research. You have all the accolades, and you're thinking second time is going to be easier. And then nobody cares about public sector. I'm like, how could you not care about the largest purchasers in the world? It doesn't matter. While they were telling me that they didn't care about, and while they were saying like there's no money in government, I was transacting $4 million in government transactions. Out of those, we have shipped to date more than 5.8 million items for government. We have about 400,000 verified products. We've worked with 35 government agencies in the United States. And what's more important to me, we've worked with the city of Seattle, other smaller cities, is that while we're revolutionizing how governments buy, I'm still getting the question, the same question I was getting in Dominican Republic, like, do the drones fly, because we don't believe you. I'm still getting this question, like, you're revolutionizing how governments buy, but are you making money? And I'm like, from the largest purchaser in the world, helping them source in real time everything they need at a fraction of the cost with a fraction of the time? No, maybe I'm not making money. Because again, it's a counterintuitive business model, and this is where you need to deep dive with the MVP. The thesis for Glass is very simple. Bring the convenience of e-commerce, Amazon, with the compliance of government. In the United States, we have the GSA, that is the General Services Administration, that employs 22 million people with government credit cards. We're just making life easier for 22 million people. If we can change the world with this, let's see later, but I think we can. And one of the main theses is, and I'm sure this happens also in Brazil, every time someone wants to buy something, depending on what they want to buy, they need to go to one different system. If it's something very small, you can go to a marketplace. If it's something a little bit bigger, you can request 3 quotations, cotizações. If it's something big, you need to do a big bidding. If you can choose something from your vendor list, you need to go to your vendor list. Each one of these systems, they don't talk to one another, okay? So if you flag a vendor and say, this vendor, not this corrupt, this vendor didn't arrive on time, and I needed to handle a pandemic, and this vendor never arrives on time. So this piece of information doesn't escalate throughout the system and throughout government. But here, we make this fragmented system and this fragmented search, we make it a one-screen search bar. And we bring all the data, wherever that data lives, into one single screen for a government buyer that happens to be a person that doesn't have time to get into complicated stuff. So I'm going to finish with the 3 biggest things that we think we're really disrupting. Even though I've been talking about governments, the disruption in government purchases is going to come from the small business side. It's going to come from including into the government economy 400 million small businesses. It's not about create more competition. Oh, well, I'm government. I'm going to talk to these 3 vendors, so they give me some pricing and I can take my site on the side. And you cannot do that with 400 million businesses at the same time. It's like blockchain. It's decentralized pricing. Everybody has their best pricing. They change it all the time, every day, all day. You cannot coordinate that. And that's what you get by including into the economy all these small businesses. But we discovered this by chance, and it's important that I tell you this, because when you are operating on a moonshot level, you don't understand the data that you're seeing when it's in front of you. So out of the $4 million that we have transacted in the platform, 2.3 million of those dollars have been fulfilled by small businesses. But let me go deeper. What I'm telling you is that over 128 small businesses that have never sold to government captured 2.3 million out of my 4 million in government sales. That's the disruption. The second disruption comes from what does a public good or a public service cost? What we are seeing with the data that we have is that by the time government buys something, the current cost is 30% over the market cost. So, more expensive thing for a suboptimal product. What are we doing? We're the largest purchaser in the world. Like, we should leverage our economy of scale. So what we're thinking is, well, the market cost already has a 30% margin because it's the market. You know, they need to make money out of everything they sell. So there is a minimum possible cost still for these goods and services. So the question we're asking is, what happens, because it's public sector, so it's the thing that benefits all of us, we can reduce the inflated cost of government, and we can just bear to the market cost. That 30% that is inflated, if we take that 30% and we put it on the quality of the good and the service, that service is gonna become more optimal than it was already. And then if we take the price down of the profit, because again, this is not a private sector product or service, this is a public product or service, we think that we can drive the cost down up to 50%. And on top of that, have the economies of scale of government play out and have a minimum possible cost for higher quality, outstanding public services. We think we can derive an algorithm with artificial intelligence to identify and maximize this efficiency across every single government transaction. So imagine, only in the United States, there are 160 million transactions happening every day. One contract, 40 small transactions. Imagine if every small transaction that we do, we get 30% off. And then the last counterintuitive piece of data are the early findings that we're finding in the United States government transactions. We were just thinking, we're just getting lucky. We started seeing all these receipts, and we started finding that if we check what government wanted to buy and did this research in real time, we found that we could get 15% off by buying locally. We're like, wait a second, this doesn't make any sense. Why are we buying from a small vendor 15% off? If this vendor is not a manufacturer, is a retailer, and is local, and again, it's a small vendor, they have no sophistication on how they set a price. Why are they cheaper than a big box chain? We're like, crazy, bad data. Let's do it again. And then we found that we were not only finding better prices from small vendors, we were finding better prices compared to the businesses that had won a contract with government. I was thinking, okay, this is crazy. This is really crazy. And when I get surprised, I know I'm in business, because that's the DNA of innovation. You were not expecting to find that thing. So this is an example of a government placing an order with Office Depot. Office Depot is one of the largest office supply companies in the world. They send us that receipt and they say, this is what we're gonna spend to buy these items. We go and source the items locally from a small mom and pop shop, 15% again. So what I'm telling you, all of our governments spend 3 to 6 months to put a contract in place, 40 people trying to put a contract in place. And what was the point of the contract? To lock price and conditions and to lock terms and conditions and to look preferred pricing for government. So you spend 3 months and all that people to look a price that I was able to beat with 10 minutes trying to source locally. That's what I'm telling you. So when we found this, we started to get in business with governments and we started to tell government, forget about us doing the right thing, forget about being efficient, let me just maximize your budget by 10%, guaranteed this year, so that benefit that you get can pay for the software. And that's where we all started to get in business. Both infrastructures that I've built, and this is the takeaway I want you to take, they didn't start with the moonshot implementation, but they did start with the moonshot mindset. We started to do linear improvements of 10%, so we could get to the exponential, to the leapfrog effect, and to the moonshot. But we started with only improvements of the 10% and many layers of 10%. We leverage a lot of exponential technologies that you can leverage today by simply Googling, how do I apply AI to the solution that I'm doing today? If you just Google it, I can guarantee you today you will have 5 different avenues of experimentation, not finished product, starting experiments. Leverage AI, big data, machine learning, blockchain, drones, robotics, edge computing. It's all out there. Start experimenting with something. There are a couple of hacks to build great things that can transform the world, and they touch both of my infrastructure companies. More observation, much more observation. Just look at the problem. Don't try to be fancy. Don't try to go to Silicon Valley to build the next big thing. The next big thing is in front of you because it's the problem that you're seeing every day that hasn't been solved. Has it been solved? Okay. Has it not been solved? There's your problem. There's your moonshot. Less processes, more trials. As we say in Silicon Valley, fail fast, fail often, and there's a matter of timing. And now is the timing for GovTech. That means you cannot take all your time, because by the time you feel you're ready to go out with your solution, and I don't care if you're in government or outside government, maybe Rafael can corroborate with me, because when he started to talk about AI, he was like a little bit, people were like, what are you talking about? He was early, and because he was early, he was not expecting to have all the dots. In fact, he brought the dots. So if you feel you're ready, you're already late, because the wave is eating you, and then you're gonna go into a trajectory that is not the one that is gonna give you the breakthrough. I'm finishing with the secrets. The team that creates innovation is the first product of the idea. You cannot create a global product, a product that transforms a city, a community, a country, if that product is not being created by people that embed this DNA of innovation, that think different, that is not afraid to say things that don't make any sense. So make sure that your culture and the people around you can at least have the same mindset that you have. We say in Silicon Valley, culture eats a strategy for breakfast. All these beautiful plans that you have, all these beautiful plans in your startups, in your GovTechs, in your companies, and in public sector, with people that don't think that they can fail and that they can experiment, that plan is never gonna happen, or it's never gonna yield the result that it can yield. You need to know that the MVP will be horrible, so like the picture in Bhutan that I showed you, and it's okay. Actually, if you don't feel embarrassed by the first version, it means you're late, because you polish it so much in your brain that you didn't give it time to do what it was supposed to do in the world and to fail in the world. It's very scary, but it takes guts to do that, but that's where you see that the thing is really creating change. And then the last secret of Silicon Valley is that an overnight success takes 7 years. So for 7 years, from 7 to 10 years, you're gonna be operating in a way that you don't like, you're gonna feel uncomfortable, you're not gonna have the answers, you're not gonna know how to talk about your thing, and then sometimes you're gonna be invited to a panel or to an event, and you're gonna try to explain what you're doing, and then 10 years later, people will say, I heard her talking about the change she was creating, but she didn't know exactly how she was gonna create that change, but she knew about the 10% improvements, and I learned how you build a moonshot by 10% MVPs. I leave you with this from Buckminster Fuller. You never change things by fighting the existing reality. To change something, build a new model that makes the existing model obsolete. That's how you create change. That's how you transform countries. Thank you, everyone.